All right. Hey, everybody. It's Ryan Steller. I'm here with Mike Martinelli. This is the briefing live. Today, we are going to talk about one of our perennial topics, which is the dimension of the human experience around grappling with diet and consumption in the modern context where things are abundant and some updated research. So we've talked about the GLP-1 class of drugs, Ozempic and Wegovy, as treatments for dealing with an addiction to food, and there is some anecdotal research on the same class of drugs for treatment of alcohol use disorder, which probably isn't as viewed as being as um, severe as or perhaps I guess alcohol use disorder is viewed as being more severe than obesity. Um, so we wanted to frame that a bit and then talk about the most recent research. If you're either somebody dealing with alcohol use disorder or a clinician, either on the social work side or the medical side, this might be a helpful intro to that, as well as any innovators who are building in the weight loss and management space. Mike, how you doing?
Doing great, except for the Eagles' loss to the
Okay,
Niners. But aside from that, doing good.
another football game I have not seen. So they, I think I heard that somebody got beat up though, right? Is that correct?
Uh, there was a lot of brawling, yes,
Okay,
and ejections. Yep.
very very on brand. So ooh, I got a little stream notification. Let me just double check that everything is going here. So we are all right. Looks good. Looks good. Okay. So um in life, so I think everybody knows, but just to recap, a huge number of Americans are dealing with, obesity and overweight, which being overweight, which leads to metabolic disorder and diabetes, and then heart disease. So a huge portion of medical spending goes into the treatment of those chronic diseases, either during, when they can be intervened, or end stage when they become like severe heart disease and heart failure, and you're getting, stents, pacemakers, defibrillators, cardiac resynchronization devices, all that stuff, valves, grafts, expensive surgeries that, usually happen in the last 10 or 20 years of life. And probably the sadder thing is, deaths of despair, which we've talked about quite a bit. Um, there's a famous Nobel Prize paper from a pair of Princeton academics, Case and Deaton, that talks about this. Outlines how unusual it is for the United States as a country with so much wealth at the apex of its advancement and growth and power globally to have a reversal in age expectancy due to the deaths that are associated with essentially consumption of substances and, what we might interpret as the mismanagement of social emotional health. So this is a very developed economy problem. So it applies to potentially like China in the future or something, but definitely in parts of parts of Europe, and then most particularly in the United States. So this is something we have been following quite closely to understand, when is the tide going to turn and what can be done from a scientific, societal perspective, and from pharmacological. So, Mike, I guess maybe kind of recap for folks, what's going on here from a like a neurochemical perspective.
So what we're basing our discussion on today is an article that was just published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry in November 2023. So it was a couple weeks ago. And what, just to give a set the framework here for the study. This isn't one of those studies where you have a bunch of participants, like clinical study, come in and they're actively trying a new, treatment. In this case, it would be semaglutide to see it test its effects on, whatever they're trying to research. This is called a retrospective chart review. So the way this study worked was it took the medical records, it collected medical records of six patients who were prescribed semaglutide for weight loss um, after having a diagnosis of clinical obesity, and but they also identified the patients that also had a diagnosis of alcohol abuse disorder. And what they did was they looked at the these six case studies, and they found that all six patients who were being treated with semaglutide for obesity uh, had a noticeable reduction in the cravings for alcohol. So it had a significant effect on you know curbing that alcoholic addiction. And so to get back to what you mentioned, like the biological components here, this has to do with the in this particular instance, the brain's reward system. So that's what's one of the main part components of any type of addiction, is that like when you're addicted to something, um, you know, depending on what the addiction is, opiates, cocaine, alcohol, you'll have different neuro transmitters involved, but there's always going to be that limbic system reward, brain's reward system. And the way that works is when you have an addiction and then you're going a while without whatever substance it is you're addicted to, so say alcohol, you start to crave it. So then you go and you drink again due to that addictive craving, and that activates your brain's reward system, which is the release of dopamine. The dopamine is that reward chemical that satisfies the craving that's going on in the addiction. So, like what they're finding here, what they're hypothesizing for future, to look at future studies, is the involvement of so semaglutide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. That's a glucagon-like uh, one receptor, and then an agonist is something that activates that receptor. So those receptors are found throughout, the body in many different areas, and they're starting to realize that it's also probably heavily involved in the whole addiction feedback mechanism, specifically as it relates to the limbic brain's reward system. So by activating that GLP-1 receptor, uh, it's also not only having its, exerting its effects on weight loss and then, blood sugar for diabetes. It's also exerting its effects on those GLP-1 receptors that are involved in the other processes, such as addiction. So with this research study, you know, it doesn't establish. It's not enough evidence to establish, say, for the FDI or FDA, not the FBI, to give clearance for semaglutide for on-label use for alcohol abuse disorder. But what this does is it actually sets up a legitimate need for comprehensive clinical study where you recruit patients, a large number of patients, and then you have a control group and a treatment group, and then you give the treatment group semaglutide, and you see, and then you collect the data and really determine the strength of the correlation, if there is one, between taking semaglutide and whether or not you have a statistically significant reduction in alcohol abuse disorder.
Right. So the and just to, kind of reframe this, we were kind of we've been talking about this topic for for months now. We've been talking about it for over a year internally, and maybe 2 years internally at this point, and then 6 months publicly. in social media and that kind of thing. Obviously, even so, we were kind of late to the game. It was I think it was the Kardashians obviously have the biggest reach, and I think they probably popularized it the most. And then it's kind of just gained steam from there. And within healthcare and delivery of healthcare, it's very controversial because Novo Nordisk, which makes so this is an old category of drugs. First off, this is not particularly new. What has changed is on-label usage, and that's a technical term for when a drug can be given to a category of patients safely according to the FDA's clearance, and that's on label. So the actual, when we read Tylenol and it says, for muscle pain for people over 5 years old or whatever, that's the literal label, and then you fit in that category. So this class of drugs being available for weight loss is still fairly new, and I think there's a lot of repulsion to it from society in general because there's it seems like cheating. It seems like cheating. Like, okay, these I think there's a group of folks that are like, oh, these people don't work out, they don't take care of their body, just getting skinny overnight, and effectively within 3 months or 6 months without having to do the work is cheating. And that particularly in the US might excite like kind of Protestant ideals around like hard work and that kind of thing. And we've been unbiased about it, other than I think conservative treatment or more natural treatment or internal behavioral change leading to physical change without much additional chemicals in your body is generally ideal, just because medical treatments can be iatrogenic, meaning the thing that they're trying to affect could maybe get helped, but they may have these side effects that are almost as bad as the original thing. So generally, that was our stance, and we've been looking into this research to try and understand what the impact is going to be, and then also calibrate the product we're building around handling it effectively, with the balance of concerns in there. So societal concerns, scientific concerns, safety concerns first off, and then personalization. So is it a fit for you? And then kind of bureaucratic concerns around, should it be paid for by your insurance company? Is this particular one safe in your particular case? Who is administering it, and how is it billed, and that kind of stuff. So I guess, Mike, I know you have to go in a little bit. So the study, I haven't had a chance to read the full study. What did you think about this? I mean, clearly this is just the beginning of expanding the indication for GLP-1s into alcohol use disorder. I think if it was a more established category, if alcohol addiction and GLP-1s was a more established category, they would have probably needed a larger study to get published. So this is, what was the actual number? It's 6.
Six patients charts, medical records.
So this is a chart, so which is different than a prospective study, right?
Yeah, it's a retrospective study. Yeah.
Right. So the design is not intentionally set up to evaluate the clinical effect necessarily. So this is a group of clinicians that were probably seeing something that was like kind of like a fuzzy pattern day to day in their clinic or whatever, and got the intuition. In the scientific method, right, they had an observation, a hypothesis, and they're more or less reporting the hypothesis, I guess, based on those observations. And the chart review is not experimental proof, right? It's we're not confirming the theory. We're merely framing the hypothesis with anecdotes. Is that fair?
Framing it and going further than that, what they're doing is they're setting the stage, making like an argument to say, hey, they're based on what we found here, this is helps to justify funding for future real research study, controlled clinical trial to test this in a number of subjects, like a real, IRB, formal clinical trial where there's a, control group and a treatment group. So that's what this is really setting the stage for, is saying, like, look at what we noticed here, even though it's only six, patients from six different medical records, the the number, the statistical significance was so significant that they say, hey, like this is not just coincidence here. Like this is definitely worth, definitely warrants further clinical study.
Can you dig into that? What is, I mean, because this is on 6 patients. I'm not sure what, like, what did they find? I know because they had case reports, they had case summaries in here, right?
Yeah, so they had a summary of each of the cases of each six patients, and it included that. So all the patients were, so just to clarify the inclusion and exclusion criteria, like what they wanted to include were patients who were clinically obese, meaning they were diagnosed with it, and they were being prescribed and currently being treated with semaglutide. I'm not sure which specific brand name, but they were being treated with that. But they also, so after you check off the box of their clinically obese, being treated with semaglutide, the third thing they want to find through in these charts, so they're looking at a bunch of charts and they chose six, is which of these patients also have a diagnosis of chronic substance abuse disorder. So once they found six patients that fit all those criteria, they looked at because they're already being treated with semaglutide, and they looked at their charts, like from the data in their health records from before they started treatment with semaglutide, specifically as related to their alcohol abuse disorder, and then they compared it to a period of the study period. So when I say study period, I'm referring to the time that passed since they were treated with semaglutide, and then they noticed a significant decrease in alcoholic abuse tendencies. So the time that passed was looks like about, it's not really clear. They say after a weekly, being prescribed it for a weekly regimen. So for a full treatment length, I guess is the standard way to say it. So after these individuals been on it long enough, standard in a standard sense, in order to get the results for weight loss, that was their endpoint, that where they were, looking at whether or not there was any change in alcohol abuse. So if I was prescribed semaglutide for weight loss on October 1st, and then the course of treatment lasted the whole month. So they said, expect to, notice results in your weight at the end of the month. That's just arbitrary. I'm just using as an example. So that would be the endpoint. So the endpoint of where they would notice an effect on the weight loss is the same endpoint where they noticed, where they want to look for whether there was a difference in alcohol abuse consumption.
All right. And
So
just to recap the method, I guess I didn't know what this was. Audit, which is alcohol use disorder identification test, and this is probably the dramatic chart that led to thinking this is worthwhile putting out there in the world. So I don't know I'm not familiar with audit scores, so I'm not sure the severity of 13, what that means. Is this like a fall over drunk, or is this like a 2 scotch a night kind of high functioning situation? But anyway, the drop off does look dramatic in these charts. So you go 13 to 5
yeah.
and a female. And it's also worth noting that these are fairly conservative dosages of semaglutide, right? Because I think
Wegovy
Wegovy is 1 and 2 milligrams, I think. I think, I don't know. I don't quote me on that. So this is this is I think this is fairly conservative treatment, which is good. Anyway, so I think the the reason we want to bring this up is, one, you're probably going to see this in social media, right? So I think one of the things we've been motivated to do with this media outlet is to try and go one step deeper, so that you as an individual, when you're personalizing your care, know, right? Because a lot of times people who are not scientists will say, oh, there's a clinical study, sounds authoritative, but there's this huge variety in the quality of clinical studies, both in terms of the level of certainty and statistical power they have. So this has low statistical power, and then the quality of the organizations and the authors behind it. And I presume these are very high quality authors. So I think this is a high quality study with low statistical power, and it's just one. And we would, the scientific method is we have to confirm this. We want to see this elsewhere. So there's going to be talking points, on TikTok, and I've already seen them on Twitter, and about the sweeping benefits of semaglutide, Ozempic, whatever, and it's good. Tirzepatide is the other one that's coming up, which will be combined with semaglutide in a drug called Zepbound. And clearly the manufacturers of these drugs will be very motivated to fund this research, because alcohol addiction is a tremendous impact on the individual, and then societally it's part of it's the cliche thing that takes down good people, and they can kind of rot a community or whatever. So in narratives. So this is extremely exciting and extremely promising. I think shout out and thank you to the Richards et al. For taking the time to publish this, because I do think as somebody whose family has been affected by addiction, so we'll just shout out the authors here. So Jesse Richards, Madison Faye Dorand, Kylie Royal, Lana Nanjed?
Jad, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Apologies.
Yeah, extremely sorry there. We're doing this live, so it's a little part of my brain is focused on technical and performance. Maria Pasquak, and Kyle
Simmons.
Kyle Simmons. Maria and Lana, feel free to flame me on Twitter. I feel bad. So yeah, and this is the Journal of Clinical Psychology, and this is brand new. This came out. Is this like a preprint? Why does it say 2024?
I was just going to say that this was published in the online November 27th, 2023, but it's going to appear in the print version of the journal in 2024. So I believe January or February.
Okay.
So, and I wanted to include this up here. So if anyone wants to look it up, it is an open access, but if anyone's part of a academic research institution and has, access to journals, you could pull this up.
Which Mike does, which is part of what we're doing here. We're not reposting this. It's available through, the summary is available through Google Scholar and PubMed as well. And I'm sure this is going to get picked up. So we found it on Healthline, but it's going to get picked up by a zillion mainstream publications. And we just wanted to try and talk through it, because the potential is insane. It's in a very emotional topic, anything to do with addiction. I think there's also a logical leap here, which is not a huge leap, which is, if it works for alcohol, it may work for, anything else that has a dopamine aspect, like cocaine or, opiates, heroin, or whatever. So, all right, it's very exciting. If you listen this long, thanks for taking interest. Please either leave a comment down below on the recording of this live feed. Please like and subscribe. Connect with us on social media, either LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever works for you. And I think that's it for today. Mike, any final words?
Nope.
Okay.
Good to go.
All right. Mike's got to run. Thank you for